The moment Jiho saw her across the park, his entire world shattered like glass hitting concrete. 1 second, he was walking hand in hand with Min Seo, his elegant fiancée, discussing wedding venue options and guest lists. The next second, his feet had stopped moving, his blood had turned to ice, and every carefully constructed wall he'd built over the past 5 years crumbled into dust. Because there she was, Angela, the woman he'd loved more than his own life, the woman he'd destroyed to save. And beside her, chasing pigeons with identical laughter, were 3 children who had his eyes, his smile, his entire face reflected back at him in triplicate. Before we begin, drop a comment and let us know where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. Min Seo's perfectly manicured hand tugged at his arm. Jiho, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Her voice carried that slight edge of annoyance she got when his attention wandered during their meticulously planned outings. She was used to being the center of his world, the prize he'd won after clawing his way from the darkness into respectable society. She didn't know about ghosts. She'd never had to bury anyone alive to survive. Jiho's voice came out strangled, foreign even to his own ears. He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't form words, because Angela had turned her head, following the direction her children were running, and her gaze had locked onto his. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 lifetimes, they stared at each other across 50 feet of manicured grass and spring flowers. Her face cycled through emotions so fast he could barely track them. Shock, recognition, pain, anger, fear, and then, like a door slamming shut, nothing. Her expression went completely blank, the way is used to when he was interrogating someone who'd betrayed the family. One of the children, a little girl with braids decorated with colorful beads, tugged on Angela's jacket. Mommy, why did you stop? We're playing tag. Her voice carried across the distance, bright and innocent and absolutely devastating. Mommy. The word hit Jiho like a bullet to the chest. Min Seo was still talking, her voice rising with concern or irritation. He couldn't tell which. Seriously, what is going on? You're being weird. Is it work? Did something happen with the merger? She stepped into his line of sight, blocking his view of Angela and the children, her perfectly made-up face creased with confusion. I need a minute, Jiho managed, his voice rough. He gently moved Min Seo aside, but when he looked back, Angela was already gathering the children, her movements quick and efficient. She said something to them, and they immediately stopped playing, falling into line beside her with the kind of instant obedience that spoke of a mother who didn't play games when she used that tone. We're leaving, Angela said, her voice carrying just far enough for him to hear. Not to him, to the children. But he heard it anyway, heard the tremor underneath the firmness, the barely controlled panic. The little boy, identical to his sisters except for his short-cropped hair, looked up at his mother with confusion. But you said we could stay for an hour. We just got here. Change of plans, Zuri. Angela's hand was already on his shoulder, steering him toward the park exit. The other 2 children fell in step without argument, sensing their mother's urgency even if they didn't understand it. Jiho's feet moved before his brain caught up. He took 3 steps forward before Min Seo's hand clamped onto his elbow like a vice. Where are you going? Min Seo's voice had gone cold, the way it did when she felt disrespected in public. Jiho, what is happening right now? Who was that woman? He should have had an answer ready. He was Jiho fucking Kong, the man who talked his way out of police raids and rival gang ambushes and boardroom coups. He could lie with a straight face to anyone about anything. But standing there, watching Angela disappear into the crowd with 3 children who were unmistakably his legendary composure evaporated like morning dew under a blowtorch. Someone I used to know, he said, and even he could hear how pathetic that sounded. Min Seo's eyes narrowed to slits. Someone you used to know? You look like you've been hit by a truck. Who is she? It's complicated. Then uncomplicated. Min Seo's voice dropped to that dangerous whisper she used when she was truly angry. Right now. But Jiho was already pulling away, his eyes tracking Angela's retreating form through the crowd of weekend parkgoers. She walked fast, her natural grace still there, but now used for escape instead of the confident stride he remembered. The children struggled to keep up with her pace, their little legs working double time. Jiho. Min Seo's voice rose sharp enough to turn heads. Several nearby families glanced their way, Korean ajumas with their visors and sun sleeves pausing their afternoon walks to witness what promised to be quality gossip material. He forced himself to stop, to turn back to Min Seo, to remember that she was his fiancée, the woman he was supposed to marry in 4 months. the woman who represented everything he'd fought to become. Respectable, clean, legitimate. She stood there in her designer dress and heels, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless, every inch the sophisticated soul socialite who graced magazine covers and charity galas. "I'm sorry," Jiho said, and he meant it. "I just saw someone I didn't expect to see. It threw me off." "Threw you off?" Minasio's laugh was sharp and humorless. "You look like you saw the woman you'd die for. Should I be worried?" The answer was yes, she absolutely should be worried, because 5 years ago Jiho would have burned down Seoul itself if it meant keeping Angela safe. But he couldn't say that. So instead he did what he'd gotten good at. He lied. "No, it's nothing. Ancient history. I'm sorry for ruining our afternoon." Minacio studied him with those calculating eyes that had made her such a successful art gallery director. She knew people, knew when they were lying, knew when something didn't add up. But she also knew the value of public image, and they were starting to attract more attention than either of them wanted. "Fine," she said eventually, her voice clipped. "We'll talk about this later. At your place." "And Jiho." She stepped closer, her voice dropping low. "Whatever that was, it better stay in the past. Because I don't share, and I don't do drama." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Minacio linked her arm through his again, and they resumed their walk, but the afternoon was ruined. Everything was ruined. Because Jiho's mind was spinning, calculating, trying to piece together a puzzle that had just exploded in his face. If this story of second chances and hard choices is pulling you in, tap the subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think Jiho should do? Should he walk away, or fight for the family he never knew? Stay with me until the very end. What happens next will catch you off guard. 5 years. Angela had been pregnant when he'd left. Had to have been. The math was screaming at him. And she'd never told him. Never reached out. Never demanded anything. She'd just disappeared back to America and raised their children alone. 3 of them. Triplets. The rational part of his brain, the part that had kept him alive through a decade of gang warfare and corporate espionage, started working through the implications. She was in Seoul, with his children. Why? How long had she been here? Did she know he was here? No. Her shock had been too genuine. She'd had no idea. This was cosmic coincidence or cosmic punishment. He wasn't sure which. Minacio chattered beside him about something, wedding-related probably, but he couldn't focus. His mind was already 3 steps ahead, planning. He needed information. He needed to know where Angela was staying, why she was in Seoul, how long she planned to be here. He needed to see those children again, to confirm what his heart already knew with certainty. They were his. Those 3 beautiful children with Angela's warm brown skin and his Korean features blended into something uniquely perfect were his kids. And he'd missed 5 years of their lives because he'd been a coward who'd chosen the easy path of walking away instead of fighting for what mattered. "Are you even listening to me?" Minacio's voice cut through his thoughts. "Sorry, what?" She sighed dramatically. "I said, we need to finalize the guest list by the end of the week. My mother is getting anxious." "Right. The guest list." Jiho forced himself to focus, to play the role of attentive fiancé. "We'll do that tonight." But he knew he wouldn't be thinking about guest lists tonight. He'd be thinking about Angela. About 3 children who deserved a father. About the life he'd thrown away because he'd been too afraid to drag Angela into his world of blood and violence. That world was supposedly behind him now. He'd gone legitimate, or as legitimate as a former gang lieutenant could go. His business ventures were legal, mostly. His political connections were strong. His reputation was clean, scrubbed of the darkest stains through careful PR and generous donations to the right causes. He'd become exactly what his father had wanted, a respectable member of Seoul's elite society. And he'd been miserable every single day of it. The walk back to his car felt endless. Minacio kept up a steady stream of conversation, but Jiho barely heard a word. His mind was locked on that moment of eye contact with Angela, the way her entire body had tensed like prey sensing a predator. She was afraid of him. The thought sat in his stomach like a stone. Angela, who had once looked at him with such trust, such love, such complete faith that he'd be there to catch her, was now afraid of him. And why wouldn't she be? He'd proven himself unworthy of her trust when he'd vanished without explanation, without goodbye, without even the decency of a lie she could have lived with. Jiho dropped Minacio off at her penthouse apartment in Gangnam with promises to call her later, promises he had no intention of keeping tonight. The moment her door closed, he was on his phone, pulling up contacts he hadn't used in years. People from his old life who owed him favors. People who could find anyone, anywhere, no questions asked. Sang-woo, Ji-ho said when the call connected. I need your help. There was a pause on the other end, then a low chuckle. Well, Ji-ho calm. Haven't heard from you since you went all respectable on us. What happened? Corporation life not exciting enough. Can you still track people? Can I still breathe? Of course I can. Who are we looking for? A woman named Angela Okoye. Nigerian, American resident. She's in Seoul right now, probably with 3 children. I need to know where she's staying, how long she's here, and anything else you can find. Another pause. This personal or business? Personal. That'll cost extra. I don't care. Just find her. Give me 2 hours. Ji-ho ended the call and sat in his car outside Min Seo's building, his hands gripping the steering wheel hard enough to hurt. His mind kept replaying the park scene over and over, looking for details he might have missed. The children had looked healthy, well cared for. Angela had looked good too, thinner maybe, with new lines around her eyes that spoke of stress and sleepless nights, but still beautiful. Still the woman who'd made him feel human for the first time in his violent life. His phone buzzed. A text from Min Seo. Thanks for today despite the weirdness. Love you. Ji-ho stared at the message but didn't respond. Love. Did he love Min Seo? He cared about her, respected her, enjoyed her company. She was smart and sophisticated and exactly the kind of woman his family approved of. But love? Real, burn the world down, die for you love? No. He'd felt that once, with Angela, and it had terrified him so much he'd run from it. Another buzz, this time from Sang-woo. A location. Angela was staying in Itaewon, in a modest apartment building near the International District. Sang-woo had included her apartment number, the name she'd rented under, and a note that she'd been in Seoul for 3 weeks, enrolled in some kind of educational consulting program through a university partnership. 3 weeks. She'd been in his city for 3 weeks, walking the same streets, breathing the same air, and he'd had no idea. The coincidence of running into her today felt less like fate and more like the universe settling old debts. Ji-ho started his car and headed toward Itaewon. He had no plan, no speech prepared. He just knew he had to see her again, had to talk to her, had to confirm what his heart already knew with absolute certainty. Those children were his, and he'd be damned if he'd walk away a second time. The drive through Seoul's evening traffic gave him too much time to think, to remember. 5 years ago, he'd been deep in the life. Not just any gangster, but the right hand to one of Seoul's most powerful crime lords. He'd been good at it too. The violence, the intimidation, the careful dance of power and fear that kept the organization running. But it had been eating him alive, piece by piece, until he'd felt more monster than man. Then he'd been sent to Los Angeles for a business expansion. Money laundering through legitimate businesses, the usual. They needed someone who spoke English, someone who could blend into American corporate culture. Ji-ho had been perfect for the job, and that's where he'd met Angela. She'd been working as a translator for the company they were using as a front, completely oblivious to what was really going on. Brilliant, with a master's degree in linguistics and a smile that could light up entire cities. She'd been assigned to help him navigate American business culture, and somewhere between contract negotiations and coffee meetings, he'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love. It had been the most terrifying thing he'd ever experienced. Because love meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant weakness, and weakness meant death in his world. But Angela had made him want to be weak, want to be vulnerable, want to be the kind of man who deserved someone like her. For 6 months, they'd had something beautiful. He'd kept his real work hidden, let her believe he was just a businessman. They'd explored LA together, talked for hours about everything and nothing, made love like the world was ending, and they were the only 2 people left alive. She'd made him laugh, something he'd forgotten how to do. She'd made him hope, which was even more dangerous. If you're watching this, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. This story is just beginning, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The choices we make in a single moment can change everything, can cost us everything. Stay with us to see how far one man will go to save the life he abandoned. Then his world had caught up with him. A rival organization had found out about Angela. Suddenly, she wasn't just his secret happiness. She was leverage, a weakness to exploit. The threats started coming in. Photos of her walking to work. Messages detailing her routine. A gift box delivered to her apartment containing a dead rat, and a note in Korean that she couldn't read, but Ji-ho understood perfectly. Everyone you love dies. He'd had 2 choices. Bring Angela fully into his world, make her a target forever, or cut her out completely. He'd chosen the latter. Told himself it was to protect her, that she'd be safer without him, that she deserved better than a life spent looking over her shoulder. So he'd done the cruelest thing he could think of. He'd left without explanation, blocked her number, disappeared back to Seoul, let her think he'd never cared, that it had all been a game, that she'd meant nothing. Because if she hated him, she'd move on. If she moved on, she'd be safe. It had nearly destroyed him. He'd thrown himself back into work with a vengeance, trying to drown the memory of her in blood and business. But every quiet moment, every night alone, he'd thought about her, wondered if she was okay, hoped she'd found someone better, someone who could give her the normal life she deserved. Never once had he considered that she might have been pregnant. Jiho parked near the apartment building in Itaewon, a neighborhood known for its international population and diverse restaurants. It made sense that Angela would choose here, somewhere that felt less foreign, less alienating. He sat in his car for 10 minutes, gathering courage like a teenager about to ask someone to prom. Finally, he got out and walked to the building. It was a decent place, nothing fancy but clean and safe. He found her apartment number and stood outside the door for a full minute before knocking. The door opened, and Angela stood there, no longer in the casual park clothes but in jeans and a simple t-shirt that said Howard University across the chest. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, her face free of makeup, her feet bare. She looked younger like this, more like the woman he remembered, except for the absolute fury blazing in her eyes. "No," she said flatly. "Absolutely not." She tried to close the door, but Jiho's hand shot out, stopping it. "Please, Angela. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. You have some nerve showing up here. How did you even find me? I have resources." "Of course you do. Because you're still that person, aren't you? Still the man who thinks he can just appear and disappear from people's lives whenever it's convenient." Her voice was low, controlled, but he could hear the rage underneath. "Go away, Jiho. You made your choice 5 years ago. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But please, just let me explain." "Explain what?" "How you ghosted me. How you threw away everything we had like it meant nothing. How you made me feel like I was crazy for thinking what we had was real." Her voice cracked on the last word, and Jiho felt something in his chest shatter. It was real. Everything was real. "I left to protect you." Angela laughed, a bitter sound with no humor in it. "Protect me? That's your excuse? You left to protect me?" She shook her head. "You want to know what happened after you left? I had a breakdown. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. Thought I'd done something wrong, that I wasn't good enough, that everything I felt had been one-sided delusion. And then I found out I was pregnant. With triplets." The words hit him like physical blows. "Angela, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know. You didn't give me a chance to tell you. You just vanished like I was some random one-night stand." Her voice was rising now, and Jiho realized they were still standing in the doorway, her neighbors probably hearing every word. "Can I come in? Please?" "Mommy, who's at the door?" The small voice came from inside the apartment, and Angela's entire demeanor changed. The fury drained away, replaced by protective alertness. She glanced over her shoulder, then back at Jiho, her eyes hard. "You need to leave. Now." "Those children," Jiho said quietly. "They're mine, aren't they?" Angela's jaw clenched. "They're mine. I raised them. I fed them. I stayed up all night when they were sick. I worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. I did everything while you were off living your life. They're mine. But they're also mine." He held her gaze, refusing to back down. "I deserve to know them." "You deserve?" Angela's laugh was sharp enough to cut. "You deserve nothing. You lost the right to deserve anything from me the day you walked out." "Mommy." The voice was more insistent now, and Jiho heard small footsteps approaching. Angela turned, blocking the doorway with her body. "Zuri, Amara, Kofi, stay in the living room. I'll be there in a second." "But who's at the door?" A little girl peeked around Angela's legs, and Jiho found himself staring into eyes that were unmistakably his own. She looked up at him with curious, open interest. "Hi, are you Mommy's friend?" The simple question nearly broke him. "Yes," he managed. "I'm an old friend. An old friend who was just leaving," Angela said firmly. She picked up her daughter, settling her on her hip. "Say goodbye." "Bye." The little girl waved cheerfully. Jiho waved back, his throat tight. "Goodbye." Angela shut the door in his face, and he heard the deadbolt click with painful finality. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed door, his mind racing. She'd said triplets. Zuri, Amara, Kofi. 3 names. 3 children. His children. And Angela was right. He'd lost the right to be their father when he'd chosen to run instead of fight. But standing there in that hallway, Having seen just a glimpse of what he'd missed, Ji-ho made a decision. He wasn't running anymore. Whatever it took, however long it took, he was going to make this right. He was going to be the father those kids deserved and the man Angela should have had 5 years ago. He just had to figure out how to do that without getting them all killed in the process. Because the truth was, his old world hadn't completely let him go. He'd gone legitimate. Yes, but there were still people who remembered who he'd been, what he'd done. There were still debts owed and grudges held. And the moment anyone from that life found out about Angela and the children, they'd become targets again. Only this time, there would be 3 innocent kids in the crossfire. Ji-ho walked back to his car, his mind already working through scenarios, calculating risks, planning moves like he used to when plotting territory expansion. He needed to be smart about this. Careful. He couldn't just force his way into their lives. Angela would fight him every step, and she'd be right too. He'd burned that bridge himself. Burned it so thoroughly there was nothing left but ash. His phone rang. Minicio. He stared at her name on the screen, then declined the call. He couldn't talk to her right now. Couldn't pretend everything was normal when his entire world had just been turned inside out. She deserved better than the distracted, dishonest version of himself he'd been giving her. She deserved the truth. But the truth would destroy everything. His engagement, his reputation, his carefully constructed, legitimate life. Minecio's family had connections, serious connections. Her father was a Supreme Court justice, her mother on the board of 3 major corporations. A scandal like this would ripple through Seoul's elite circles like a tsunami. Illegitimate children with a foreign woman from his criminal past? The tabloids would have a field day. Ji-ho drove aimlessly through Seoul's neon-lit streets, passing through neighborhoods that held memories both good and terrible. Gangnam, where he'd brokered deals that had made him rich and cost him his soul. Hongdae, where he'd once beaten a man half to death for stealing from the family. Itaewon, where Angela now lived with children who shared his blood. By the time he got home to his penthouse apartment overlooking the Han River, it was past midnight. The space was all sharp angles and expensive furniture, the kind of place featured in architecture magazines. Cold. Empty. A perfect reflection of what his life had become. Ji-ho poured himself a glass of whiskey and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over Seoul's glittering skyline. Somewhere out there, Angela was probably putting 3 children to bed, reading them stories, kissing their foreheads, doing all the things parents do. Things he should have been doing. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Minicio. Are you okay? You've been weird since the park. Call me. He typed out a response. I'm fine. Tomorrow okay? Tired tonight. The lie came easy. It always did. But for the first time in years, he felt disgusted by his own dishonesty. Angela had accused him of still being that person, and she was right. He'd traded one kind of dishonesty for another, swapped violence for corporate manipulation. But at his core, he was still a man who lied to survive. Subscribe and stay with me. The choices made next will change every life in this story. The next morning, Ji-ho woke up with a plan. He needed information before he could act. He needed to understand Angela's situation, what brought her to Seoul, how long she was staying, what her life looked like now. He couldn't just barge in demanding father's rights. He needed to be strategic. So he did what he'd always been good at. He called in favors. By noon, he had a full report. Angela had moved to Seoul 3 weeks ago on a 6-month contract with an international education consulting firm. She was developing English language programs for Korean universities. The job paid well, and she'd brought the kids with her because the contract was too long to leave them behind. They were enrolled in an international school in Itaewon. She lived alone with them, no partner in the picture. The kids were 5 years old, born March 15th, healthy and by all accounts, happy. March 15th. He did the math backward. She'd been pregnant when he left. Probably just a few weeks along, maybe not even knowing yet herself. Which meant she'd gone through the entire pregnancy alone, had dealt with the shock and fear and overwhelming responsibility of triplets without any support from him. The guilt was crushing. Ji-ho closed the file and sat back in his office chair, staring at nothing. He was in his legitimate office now, the one in the glass tower in Gangnam, where he ran his import-export company. Everything legal, everything clean. Or clean enough. His secretary knocked on the door. Mr. Kong, your 11 o'clock is here. He waved her away. Cancel it. Cancel everything today. She hesitated. But it's the meeting with the Chinese investors. I said cancel it. His tone left no room for argument. She bowed and left quickly. Ji-ho grabbed his jacket and headed out. He had no destination in mind, but his feet carried him to Itaewon, to the international school where his children were learning to read and write and play with other kids. He parked across the street and waited, feeling like a creep, feeling like exactly what he was, a stranger lurking outside his own kid's school. The day was warm, late spring sunshine, making everything look soft and golden. Other parents arrived for pickup, mostly expat families, some Korean mothers with mixed-race children. It was a different world from the one he'd grown up in, more diverse, more open. His own childhood had been rigid, traditional, violent. His father had run a small gang in Busan, nothing like the Seoul operations Ji-ho had later joined, but enough to teach his son that strength was all that mattered, that showing weakness got you killed. What kind of father would he even be? He had no model to follow except the negative example of his own dad. Could he be gentle? Patient? Could he be the kind of father who helped with homework and attended school plays and kissed scraped knees? Or would he just corrupt them, drag them down into the darkness that still lived inside him? If you believe people can change, even men like him, subscribe and share your thoughts below. The school bell rang, and children poured out of the building like a dam breaking. Ji-ho's heart rate spiked as he scanned the crowd for familiar faces. And there they were, Zuri, Amara, and Kofi, walking together with their matching backpacks, chattering animatedly about something. They moved as a unit, the way triplets often did, finishing each other's sentences, laughing at shared jokes. Angela appeared seconds later, and Ji-ho's breath caught. She wore a professional outfit today, probably had been working, but she'd changed into sneakers for the walk home. The moment she saw her children, her entire face lit up with a love so pure and fierce it made Ji-ho's chest ache. She crouched down as they ran to her, all three talking over each other, and she listened to each one patiently, giving them her full attention. This was what he'd missed. Every single day of their lives, Angela had been there. First steps, first words, first everything. And he'd been here in Seoul, playing businessman, planning a wedding to a woman he didn't love, pretending his past didn't exist. One of the kids, Kofi, pointed at something across the street, and Ji-ho's blood went cold. The boy was pointing directly at his car. Angela's head snapped up, and her eyes locked onto his through the windshield. Even from this distance, he could see her expression shift from confusion to recognition to absolute fury. She said something sharp to the children, grabbed their hands, and marched in his direction. Ji-ho got out of the car, knowing he was about to get destroyed but unable to run away this time. Angela stopped 10 feet away, keeping the children behind her like a shield. Are you stalking us now? Is that what this is? I just wanted to see them, Ji-ho said quietly. I'm sorry. I know this looks bad. Looks bad? It is bad. This is inappropriate and creepy, and I swear to God, Ji-ho, if you don't leave us alone, I will call the police. Mommy, why are you yelling? One of the girls tugged on Angela's hand. Who was that man? Angela's jaw worked. She looked at her children, then back at Ji-ho, and he could see her struggling with what to say. Finally, she knelt down to their level. This is someone Mommy used to know a long time ago, but he needs to leave now. Why? Kofi asked with the blunt curiosity of 5-year-olds. Is he mean? The question hung in the air like smoke. Angela's eyes met Ji-ho's, and for a moment, he saw past her anger to the hurt underneath, the pain he'd caused that had never really healed. No, she said finally. He's not mean. He's just someone from a different time. Come on, let's go home. We have homework. She herded the children away without looking back. Ji-ho stood there in the middle of the sidewalk, watching them go, feeling more helpless than he'd ever felt dodging bullets or facing down rival gangs. Because violence, he understood. Fear he could work with. But this? A woman he'd loved and betrayed, children who didn't know him, a gulf so wide he couldn't see how to cross it. This was beyond anything his old skills could navigate. His phone rang. This time, he answered. Hello. Ji-ho, we need to talk. Minesio's voice was cold, clipped. Now. I'm in the middle of something. I know about the woman. I hired someone to look into it. Angela Okoye, right? The one from America? The one you couldn't stop staring at in the park. She paused, and he could hear papers shuffling. Want to know what else I found out? She has 3 children. 5 years old. Interesting timing, don't you think? Ji-ho closed his eyes. Of course, she'd investigated. Minesio hadn't gotten where she was by being naive or passive. Minesio, I can explain. Save it. I'm coming to your place in an hour. You're going to tell me everything, and then we're going to figure out how to handle this before it becomes a public disaster. Because if you think I'm going to let some foreign woman and her bastard children destroy everything I've worked for, you're delusional. The line went dead. Ji-ho stood there, phone still pressed to his ear, the weight of his choices crushing down on him like rubble from a collapsed building. He'd spent 5 years building a new life, trying to escape his past, trying to become someone worth respecting. And in one afternoon, it had all come crashing down. The worst part? He didn't even care. Because standing there, having seen his children's faces, having heard them call Angela mommy with such love and trust, Jiho realized something fundamental had shifted inside him. That old life he'd been so desperate to leave behind. That clean, respectable, empty existence? It meant nothing. Angela and those 3 kids meant everything. Now he just had to convince Angela of that, and survive Minasio's wrath, and figure out how to be a father, and deal with the fact that his old enemies would eventually find out about this vulnerability. Simple, right? Jiho laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that startled a passing Ajumma who gave him a wide berth. Nothing about this was going to be simple, but for the first time in 5 years, he felt awake. Alive. Terrified. Yes, but in a way that felt real, not the numb performance he'd been giving for so long. His phone buzzed with a text from Sangwoo. Heard you're looking into someone from your past. Be careful, boss. Word travels, and not everyone from the old days is happy with how you left. Jiho stared at the message, his stomach sinking. He'd known this was a risk, that pulling on threads from his past might alert people he'd rather forget. But he'd been too focused on Angela to think clearly about the implications. In his old world, family was leverage. Children were weapons to be used against enemies. And Jiho had made plenty of enemies during his years in the organization. He needed to be smarter about this. More careful. But careful meant slow, and slow meant watching Angela and his children from a distance while they built a life that didn't include him. The thought was unbearable. Jiho drove back to his penthouse, his mind spinning through scenarios. Minacio would arrive in an hour, demanding explanations and damage control. He could lie, spin this as a fling from his past that meant nothing. But the DNA would prove otherwise eventually, and Minacio was smart enough to demand proof. He could tell the truth and hope she'd be understanding, though that seemed laughably unlikely given her reaction on the phone. Or he could do what he should have done 5 years ago. Be honest. Face the consequences. Fight for what mattered. The penthouse felt more like a prison than usual as he paced through it, waiting. He thought about calling Angela, trying to explain himself properly, but she'd made her position clear. She wanted nothing to do with him, and he couldn't blame her for that. Trust wasn't something you could demand or negotiate. It had to be earned, and he'd squandered his chance at earning hers. The doorbell rang exactly 1 hour after Minacio's call. She believed in punctuality the way some people believed in religion. Jiho opened the door to find her standing there in a power suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month, her hair pulled back severely, her expression carved from ice. We need to discuss the situation, Minacio said, walking past him into the penthouse without waiting for an invitation. She set her designer bag on his counter with deliberate precision, then turned to face him with arms crossed. Start talking. Jiho closed the door and moved to the windows, needing the distance. Her name is Angela. We met in Los Angeles 5 years ago when I was handling the expansion. I know her name. I want to know what she was to you. Everything. The word came out before he could stop it. She was everything. Minacio's jaw tightened. Was. Past tense. So what changed? My life caught up with me. I was still deep in the organization then, and some people found out about her. She became a target. I ended things to protect her. How noble, Minacio said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Except you forgot to mention the part where you got her pregnant. I didn't know. Didn't know or didn't care? Didn't know. I left before she could have told me. By the time she found out, I was gone. Minacio walked to the bar and poured herself a drink, something she never did before evening. That's how he knew she was rattled, though she'd never admit it. And the children? I assume they're yours. Yes. Can you prove it? They look exactly like me, Minacio. You saw them in the park. She took a long sip of whiskey, her eyes never leaving his face. This is a disaster. Do you understand that? We're supposed to get married in 4 months. My family has connections to everyone who matters in this country. My father is a Supreme Court justice. If this gets out, I know. Do you? She laughed, sharp and humorless. I don't think you do. This isn't just embarrassing, Jiho. This could destroy both of our reputations. Secret children from your criminal past? With a foreign woman? The media would eat this alive. My family would be humiliated. Your business partners would distance themselves. Everything we've both worked for would be gone. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. She set down her glass with a sharp clink. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to pay this woman off. A generous amount, Enough to buy her silence and get her on a plane back to America. The children stay with her, obviously. You have no relationship with them, no contact. This stays buried. Jiho turned from the window to face her directly. No. Excuse me. I said no. I'm not paying her off. I'm not sending her away. And I'm not abandoning those children again. Min Seo stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Have you lost your mind? This is the only way to contain this situation. I don't want to contain it. I want to fix it. Fix it. She laughed again, incredulous. Jiho, you can't fix this. You walked away from this woman 5 years ago. You have no rights here, no claim. You think you can just show up and play father now? She'll never allow it. Probably not. But I'm going to try anyway. Then you're a fool. Min Seo grabbed her bag, her movements sharp with anger. And I'm not going to stand by and watch you destroy everything for some misplaced guilt over a past mistake. So here's your choice. Either you handle this the smart way, or I'm done. The engagement is off. My family will make sure every door and soul closes in your face. You'll be persona non grata in every circle that matters. Then I guess the engagement is off. The words hung in the air between them. Min Seo's face went through several expressions, shock, hurt, fury, before settling on cold contempt. You're choosing them over me? Over everything we've built. I'm choosing them over a lie, Jiho said quietly. This thing between us, Min Seo, it was never real. Not really. We both know that. It was convenient, looked good on paper, made sense for both our careers. But love? No. I cared about you. I respected you. But I never loved you. Not the way I loved her. Min Seo's hand flew before he could react, her palm cracking across his face hard enough to snap his head to the side. They stood frozen for a moment, her hand still raised, his cheeks stinging, both of them breathing hard. I could have loved you, she said, her voice shaking. If you'd let me. If you'd actually tried instead of just going through the motions. But you're right. This was convenient. And now it's over. She headed for the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. When this blows up in your face, and it will, don't come crying to me. You've made your choice. Live with it. The door slammed behind her, and Jiho stood alone in his too empty penthouse, his cheeks still burning from her slap. He should feel devastated. He'd just ended an engagement to one of Seoul's most eligible women, effectively social suicide in their circles. But instead, he felt relief. Lighter. Somehow, like he'd been carrying a weight he hadn't noticed until it was gone. His phone rang again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. He answered cautiously. Hello. Jiho Kong. The voice was male, older, with a Busan accent thick enough to cut. It's been a long time. Jiho's blood went cold. He recognized that voice, though he hadn't heard it in 5 years. Park Dong-woo, one of the highest-ranking members of the organization he'd left behind. A man with a long memory and a longer grudge list. Mr. Park, to what do I owe this pleasure? Heard some interesting things through the grapevine. Something about you and a foreign woman. Children, too. Imagine my surprise, learning that our dear Jiho had a secret family. Jiho's hand tightened on the phone. My personal life is none of your concern. Oh, but that's where you're wrong. See, when you left us, you took certain knowledge with you. Information that could be very damaging if it fell into the wrong hands. We let you go because you swore you'd never be a problem. But now you're making waves, drawing attention to yourself. And that makes us nervous. I haven't said anything to anyone. I never will. Good. Let's keep it that way. And as insurance? Stay away from that woman and those kids. Because if you keep sniffing around your past, well, accidents happen. Especially to people who don't know to watch their backs. The line went dead. Jiho stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, his mind racing. This was what he'd feared 5 years ago, the reason he'd left Angela in the first place. His past wasn't content to stay buried. It had teeth, and it was biting. But this time, he wasn't running. This time, he was going to fight. If this story is making you feel something real, like this video, comment what you think about Jiho's decision, and subscribe now. The ending will stay with you. The next morning, Jiho woke up with a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal, possibly both. He'd spent the night drinking coffee and pacing his penthouse, thinking through every angle, every possible move. If Park and the organization wanted him to stay away from Angela and the kids, that meant they saw them as leverage. Which meant they were in danger as long as Jiho's connection to them was known, but unprotected. The solution was obvious, if insane. He needed to bring them closer, not push them away. He needed to make them so publicly obviously his that harming them would bring down heat the organization couldn't handle. He needed to legitimize this, make it undeniable and legal and protected. He needed to tell the world those were his children. The plan had holes big enough to drive a truck through, and Angela would probably kill him herself before any gangster got the chance. But it was better than hiding, better than pretending, better than watching from a distance while danger circled them. Jiho showered, dressed in his most respectable business suit, and drove to Itaewon. It was early enough that Angela would be getting the kids ready for school. He parked outside her building and waited, knowing she'd have to come down eventually. 20 minutes later, the door opened, and out came Angela with all 3 children in tow. They were in their school uniforms, Kofi dragging his feet and complaining about something while the girls skipped ahead. Angela looked tired, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, her clothes practical rather than stylish. She looked beautiful. She spotted his car immediately, and her entire body tensed. She said something to the children that made them walk ahead while she marched to his driver's side window. He rolled it down before she could bang on it. What part of leave us alone is unclear to you? Angela's voice was low but fierce. I will call the police, Jiho. I'm not joking. I know. And I'm sorry. But we need to talk. It's important. Nothing you have to say is important enough to justify stalking my children and me. You're in danger. They're in danger. Because of me. That stopped her. Her eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Not here. Not where the kids can hear. Can we meet tonight? After they're in bed? Please, Angela. I wouldn't be here if it weren't serious. She studied his face, and he let her see his fear, his desperation. Whatever else he was, he'd never been able to lie to her effectively. She'd always seen through him. Fine, she said finally. 8 o'clock. My place. But Jiho, if this is some manipulation, some attempt to worm your way into our lives, I swear I will make you regret it. It's not. I promise. She walked away without responding, gathering up her children and heading toward the school. Jiho watched them go, his stomach in knots. He had 12 hours to figure out exactly how to explain to Angela that his criminal past had found them, and that the only way to keep her and the children safe might be to do the one thing she'd never agreed to: let him publicly claim them as his own. The day dragged by in a blur of phone calls and meetings he couldn't focus on. News of his broken engagement had already spread through Seoul's elite circles, and his phone wouldn't stop buzzing with calls from business associates and family members demanding to know what happened. He ignored most of them. The only person he called back was his mother. Jiho, is it true? You broke off the engagement. His mother's voice was sharp with disapproval. Min Seo's family is very upset. They're saying you humiliated her. It wasn't going to work, Iyama. Not going to work? You dated for 2 years. The wedding was planned. What happened? Jiho closed his eyes, leaning back in his office chair. I'm not in love with her. I never was. It wouldn't have been fair to either of us. Love. His mother said the word like it was a foreign concept. Marriage isn't about love, Jiho. It's about partnership, stability, family reputation. You know this. Maybe I don't want a marriage like that. Then what do you want? Something real. His mother sighed, long and disappointed. You sound like a teenager, not a 32-year-old man. This is about that woman from Los Angeles, isn't it? The one you wouldn't talk about when you came back. Jiho's eyes flew open. You knew about Angela? I'm your mother. Of course I knew something happened there. You came back different, distant. I assumed it was a fling that went sour. It wasn't a fling. And she's here. In Seoul. Silence on the other end. Then, carefully, why is she in Seoul? Working. With our children. Another long silence. Children? Plural. Triplets. 5 years old. I just found out. His mother let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a groan. Jiho, what have you done? Made a mess of everything, apparently. But I'm trying to fix it. By breaking off your engagement and creating a scandal? How does that fix anything? Because Min Seo wanted me to pay Angela off and send her away. To pretend the kids don't exist. And I can't do that. I won't. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet. But I need you to trust me, Iyama. Please. His mother sighed again. You were always stubborn, even as a child. If these children are yours, they're my grandchildren. I want to meet them. I'll arrange it. If Angela lets me. She should. You're their father. Being a father is more than biology, Iyama. I haven't earned the title yet. Then earn it, his mother said simply. And Jiho? Be careful. If people from your old life find out about this. They already have. That's why I need to handle this carefully. Then handle it. But don't get those children hurt in the process. Promise me. I promise. He hung up and sat in his office as the afternoon light faded to evening. At 7:30, he left the building and drove back to Itaewon. He stopped at a convenience store and bought some snacks, feeling awkward and useless. What do you bring when you're meeting the children you didn't know you had? Toys felt presumptuous. Nothing felt wrong. Snacks seemed like a safe middle ground. Subscribe and stay with me. The choices made next will change every life in this story. At precisely 8 o'clock, he knocked on Angela's door. She opened it immediately, like she'd been waiting. She'd changed into comfortable clothes, and her hair was down, falling in natural curls around her face. She looked at the bag of snacks in his hand with an expression he couldn't read. "They're asleep," she said quietly. "Living room. And keep your voice down." He followed her inside, taking in details he'd missed during their brief confrontation at the door the night before. The apartment was small but well-maintained, decorated with the kind of warmth that came from someone who cared. Children's drawings covered the fridge. A bookshelf overflowed with stories and picture books. Toys were neatly organized in bins. It was a home, something his cold penthouse had never been. Angela sat in an armchair, gesturing for him to take the couch. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, tension in every line of her body. "Talk," she said. "What's this danger you mentioned?" Jiho set down the bag of snacks and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "When I left you 5 years ago, it was because people from my organization found out about you. They started making threats, sending messages that made it clear you were a target. I thought if I disappeared from your life completely, they'd lose interest. They'd forget about you." "Your organization," Angela repeated slowly. "You mean the gang you were part of? The one you lied to me about?" "Yes." "So everything I suspected was true. You weren't just a businessman. You were a criminal." "I was. I'm not anymore. I left that life behind. But some people from that world found out about you and the children. Yesterday, I got a call from one of the higher-ups. He made it very clear that if I continue trying to be part of your lives, there would be consequences." Angela's face had gone pale. "Are you telling me that because you showed up in the park, because you couldn't leave well enough alone, you've put a target on my children's backs?" "I'm telling you the target was always there. It just became active again when someone reported back that I'd been seen with you. Get out." Angela's voice was shaking. "Get out of my house right now." "Angela, please. You left to protect me? That's what you said. You left to keep me safe. And now you're telling me that by coming back, by stalking us, by making your presence known, you've done the exact opposite?" She stood up, her hands clenched into fists. 5 years. 5 years I've been raising these children alone, and they've been safe, happy, normal. And you show up and ruin everything in 48 hours. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. You're dangerous, Jiho. You've always been dangerous. And I was an idiot to ever think otherwise. Tears were streaming down her face now, angry tears. "I want you to leave. I want you to get as far away from us as possible. And I want you to stay away this time. Forever. I can't do that." "Why not? You did it before." "Because I know about them now." Jiho was on his feet too, his own control slipping. "Because I saw their faces and heard their voices, and I can't just walk away and pretend they don't exist. I'm not strong enough to do that again." "Then you're a coward and a selfish bastard, because walking away is exactly what keeps them safe." "No, it's not. Don't you see? Hiding doesn't work. These people already know about you. Distance won't make them forget. But legitimacy might protect you. If I publicly acknowledge the children as mine, if I make this official and visible, harming you becomes too risky. Right now you're a secret, leverage they can use quietly. But if you're out in the open, if everyone knows who you are, you become untouchable." Angela stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "You want to announce to the world that you have secret children with a foreign woman? Do you have any idea what that would do to your reputation?" "I don't care about my reputation." "Well, I care about mine. And theirs." She gestured toward the bedrooms. "I've worked so hard to build a stable life for them. We don't need your drama or your danger or your sudden interest in playing daddy. We were fine before you showed up, and we'll be fine after you leave. Will you?" Jiho stepped closer, keeping his voice low. "Angela, these people don't forget. They hold grudges for decades. If they think they can use you to get to me, they will. And I can't protect you from the shadows. The only way to protect you is to claim you, to make you so publicly mine that touching you would bring down attention they can't afford. Claim us? Like we're property? Listen to yourself, Jiho. This is insane. I know it's insane, but it might also be the only thing that works." Angela wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking small and vulnerable in a way that broke his heart. "I can't do this. I can't let you back into our lives just because you've decided we need rescuing from problems you created. Those kids deserve stability. They deserve a father who's present and safe and normal. You're none of those things. I could be. I'm trying to be. Trying isn't enough. They stared at each other across the small living room, both breathing hard, both running on emotion rather than logic. In the silence, Jiho heard a small sound from one of the bedrooms. A tiny voice calling out, "Mommy?" Angela's entire demeanor changed instantly, the fierce protectiveness replacing her anger. She hurried to the bedroom, and Jiho heard her soft voice comforting whichever child had woken up. He stood there feeling useless, feeling like an intruder in a life he should have been part of from the beginning. When Angela came back, her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "You need to leave. But I'll think about what you said. About the danger. I need to verify this isn't just manipulation. Give me 2 days." "Angela." 2 days, Jiho. "That's all I'm promising. Now please go before you wake up all 3 of them. If they see you here, they'll have questions I'm not ready to answer." He nodded, knowing he'd pushed as far as he could tonight. As he passed her on the way to the door, she grabbed his arm. "If anything happens to them because of you," she said quietly, her eyes burning with fierce maternal protection, "I will kill you myself. Forget your gang friends. I'll be the one you need to worry about. I believe you." He meant it, and he respected her for it. These children had a warrior for a mother, someone who would burn the world down to keep them safe. They were lucky, even if they didn't know it yet. Jiho left her apartment and sat in his car for a long moment, his head against the steering wheel. Everything Angela had said was true. He was dangerous. His presence had put them at risk. The smart thing, the right thing, would be to disappear again and pray Park and his people lost interest. But Jiho was done being smart if smart meant abandoning his children. Done doing the right thing if the right thing meant hiding from his responsibilities. For once in his miserable life, he was going to fight for something worth fighting for. He drove to the only place that made sense at midnight when your world was falling apart. His old neighborhood in Yongsan. To a pojangmaka where the owner didn't ask questions and the soju flowed freely. He took a seat at the plastic table and ordered a bottle. Rough night. The ajumma who ran the place set down the soju and some side dishes without being asked. She'd been here forever, had probably served his type 1,000 times. Men drinking alone at midnight never had good stories. Rough life, Jiho corrected, pouring himself a shot. She laughed, a raspy sound from decades of smoking. "Aren't they all?" He drank, the familiar burn of cheap soju cutting through his throat. Around him, the neighborhood hummed with late-night energy. Students stumbling home from noribangs. Delivery drivers on scooters. Exactly the kind of place he'd frequented in his old life, before he'd tried to become someone respectable. Jiho Kong. "Never thought I'd see you in a place like this again." He looked up to find Sang-woo sliding into the seat across from him, already reaching for a soju glass. His old information broker, the one who'd helped him find Angela. Sang-woo looked the same as always. Expensive streetwear, multiple phones, the air of someone who knew everyone's secrets. "Should I ask how you found me?" Jiho asked. "Please. I make a living finding people. You weren't even trying to hide." Sang-woo poured himself a drink. "Heard about your engagement. Condolences or congratulations?" "Neither. It was the right call." "Because of the woman?" "Angela." Jiho gave him a sharp look. "Are you keeping tabs on me?" "Friend, half of Seoul is keeping tabs on you right now. You broke off an engagement to a Supreme Court justice's daughter for a foreign woman with 3 kids. It's the hottest gossip in Gangnam since that Tripl got caught with his secretary. Great. It gets better. Word on the street is Park Dong-woo is interested in your situation. Very interested." Jiho's hand tightened on his glass. "How interested?" "The kind of interested that involves meetings with people who handle problems. You know the type." Sang-woo leaned back, studying Jiho's face. "Want to tell me what you did to piss off the organization? I thought you parted on good terms." "I did. But apparently having a family makes me a liability now." "A family?" Sang-woo whistled low. "The kids are yours then?" The math checked out, but I wasn't sure. "They're mine." "And you're planning to do what exactly?" "Play happy family while Park and his crew circle like sharks." Jiho drank instead of answering. What was he planning to do? He talked big to Angela about protection through visibility, but the logistics of that were complicated. He couldn't just post on social media, "Hey everyone, meet my secret family," and expect that to work. He needed legal protections, public acknowledgement, a strategy that made Angela and the children untouchable. "I need to legitimize them," Jiho said finally. "Make them undeniably mine in a way that brings legal and social protections. If they're just my secret ex-girlfriend and kids, they're vulnerable. But if they're my acknowledged family, they become too risky to touch," Sang-woo finished. "Not a terrible plan. Risky as hell, but not terrible. How's the mother feel about this?" She hates me. Well, that's a problem. Tell me about it. Jiho poured another shot. But she's smart. She'll see the logic eventually. She has to. And if she doesn't, then I'll find another way to protect them. But I'm not walking away this time. Not for anything. Sang-woo studied him with sharp eyes. You really love her. The woman, I mean. This isn't just about the kids. Jiho didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Sang-woo laughed and shook his head. You're an idiot. But at least you're a romantic idiot. Look, if you're serious about this, you need more than visibility. You need legal protections. Paternity established, custody arrangements, the works. And you need to do it fast, before Park decides to make his move. How fast? Days, not weeks. These people don't wait around when they see an opportunity. Jiho felt the cold weight of urgency settle in his stomach. Can you help? With information? Sure. With legal work? You need a lawyer, preferably one who specializes in family law and international cases. I know a guy. He's expensive and discreet. Two qualities you desperately need right now. Set up a meeting. Tomorrow, if possible. Sang-woo pulled out one of his mini phones and started texting. Done. He'll see you at 10. His office in Gangnam. He paused, then added more seriously. Jiho, you know this is going to get ugly, right? Once you start legal proceedings, once you make this public, there's no going back. Your family will find out. Your business partners. Everyone. Your past will come up. Are you ready for that? No. But I'm doing it anyway. They drank in silence for a moment, the sounds of late night soul washing over them. Finally, Sang-woo stood up and clapped Jiho on the shoulder. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. Stupid, dangerous, probably suicidal, but right. Those kids deserve a father who fights for them. Try not to get killed in the process. After Sang-woo left, Jiho stayed at the Pojangmaka for another hour, drinking and thinking. His phone kept buzzing with messages he ignored. Minesio's family lawyer demanding to speak with him. His own mother asking if he was okay. Business associates expressing concern about recent developments. Only one message made him pause. It was from an unknown number, just 2 words, final warning. Park. It had to be. The organization wasn't going to wait patiently while Jiho figured out his family situation. They wanted him scared, compliant, away from Angela and the kids. They wanted to use fear to control him the way they'd controlled him 5 years ago. But Jiho wasn't the same man he'd been 5 years ago. He'd spent 5 years building legitimate power, making connections, establishing himself in Seoul's business and political circles. He had resources now, allies, options. And most importantly, he had something worth fighting for. He paid his tab and drove home through empty streets. His penthouse felt more oppressive than ever, all sharp edges and cold surfaces. He stood at the window looking out over Seoul's glittering skyline, wondering where in that sprawl of lights Angela was, if she was sleeping or lying awake worrying about the danger he'd brought to her door. The next morning, Jiho woke early and dressed carefully for his meeting with the lawyer. Professional but not too corporate, approachable but not weak. Image mattered in these situations, and he needed every advantage he could get. The lawyer's office was in a discreet building in Gangnam, the kind of place that catered to clients who valued privacy. The receptionist barely looked up as she directed him to a conference room. He waited 5 minutes before a man in his 50s walked in, carrying a thick briefcase and wearing an expression that said he'd seen everything. Mr. Kong, I'm Attorney Choi. Sang-woo filled me in on the basics, but I need to hear the details from you directly. He sat down and pulled out a legal pad. Start from the beginning. Jiho told the story as straightforwardly as he could. The relationship with Angela 5 years ago, his abrupt departure, the children he'd just discovered, the threats from his former associates, the need to establish legal paternity and protections as quickly as possible. Attorney Choi took notes without judgment, his pen scratching across paper. When Jiho finished, the lawyer sat back and tapped his pen against his lips. This is complicated but not impossible. The main issues are establishing paternity, which requires DNA testing and the mother's cooperation. Determining custody arrangements, which again requires the mother's cooperation. And protecting the family from potential threats, which is trickier, but there are legal mechanisms we can use. How long does all of this take? With cooperation, we could expedite the paternity test to a few days. Custody arrangements would take longer, but we could file temporary agreements. As for protection, I'd recommend applying for protective orders based on the credible threats to the family. That gives you legal documentation of the danger and allows for police intervention if necessary. The mother doesn't trust me. Getting her cooperation won't be easy. Attorney Choi gave him a look. Then you need to convince her that cooperation is in her children's best interest. Which it is, by the way. If there are legitimate threats to their safety, establishing legal documentation of those threats and your relationship to the children creates a paper trail that law enforcement can use. It's not perfect protection, but it's something. Jiho nodded slowly. And what about my past? The organization I used to be part of? If we file legal documents, if this becomes public, people will dig into my history. They will. But you're not currently under investigation for anything, correct? No pending charges. No. I went clean when I left. Made sure of it. Then the worst that happens is bad publicity. People finding out you used to be involved in organized crime isn't ideal, but it's not illegal in itself. You've paid your taxes, run legitimate businesses for 5 years. You're a reformed character, as far as the law is concerned. That's one way to put it. Attorney Choi smiled slightly. Mr. Kong, I've represented dozens of men transitioning from your old world to legitimate society. The key is owning your past while demonstrating clear change. You made mistakes. You've reformed. You're now trying to do right by your children. That's a narrative people can accept. And if Park and his people don't accept it? The lawyer's expression sobered. Then we document every threat, every approach, every attempt at intimidation. We build a case that if anything happens to you or your family, the police know exactly where to look. It's deterrence through exposure. These organizations thrive in shadows. Dragging them into light makes them vulnerable. It was essentially the same strategy Jiho had explained to Angela, but hearing it from a lawyer made it sound more legitimate, more possible. All right, what's the first step? Get the mother to agree to a paternity test. Once we have DNA proof, we can file for legal recognition of paternity. That establishes your parental rights and responsibilities. Then we work on custody arrangements and protective measures. And if she refuses, then this becomes exponentially more difficult. You'd have to petition the court to compel testing, which takes time and creates antagonism. Better to convince her that working together is better for everyone involved. Jiho left the lawyer's office with a folder full of documents and a plan that felt slightly less insane than it had before. The hard part would be convincing Angela to go along with it. He had less than a day left on the 2 days she'd given him to think. He decided to spend that time doing something useful, learning about his children. He hired a different investigator than Sang-woo, someone who specialized in background checks for custody cases. By evening, he had a full report. Zuri, Amara, and Kofi Okoye, 5 years old, currently enrolled in Seoul International School. All 3 were healthy, developmentally on track. Teacher reports described them as bright, well-behaved, close with each other. Zuri was the leader, bold and outspoken. Amara was quieter, artistic, loved drawing. Kofi was the peacemaker, sensitive, good at reading emotions. Jiho read the report 3 times, absorbing every detail. These were his children. These small humans with their own personalities and preferences and dreams. And he'd missed every moment of their lives so far. The guilt was crushing, but he couldn't drown in it. Forward motion was all that mattered now. The next evening, Jiho returned to Angela's apartment at exactly 8 o'clock, the agreed-upon time. She opened the door looking wary, her arms crossed defensively. Come in. But quietly. He followed her inside. Noticed she'd set up at the small dining table instead of the living room. More formal, more distance between them. She had a laptop open and papers spread out in front of her. I did my own research, Angela said without preamble. About the organization you were part of? About Park Dong-woo. About the kinds of things these people do to maintain control. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking slightly. You were right. The danger is real. I found news articles about disappearances, accidents that weren't accidents. These people don't play games. Jiho sat down across from her, relief and dread mixing in his chest. Relief that she believed him. Dread at what that meant. I also looked into Korean family law, Angela continued. Talked to an international legal consultant through my company. And I understand what you were suggesting. About making our relationship to you public and legal as protection. She paused. I hate that it makes sense. I'm sorry this is happening. I'm sorry I brought this into your life. Twice, she said sharply. You've brought danger into my life twice now. First 5 years ago when your gang found out about me, and now again when you couldn't just leave us alone. She closed her laptop with a snap. So here's what's going to happen. I will agree to a paternity test. I will agree to legal documentation of your relationship to the children. But I have conditions. Name them. First, you don't get to just walk into their lives like everything's normal. You want to be their father? You earn it. Slowly. Carefully. On my terms. Agreed. Second, the moment I think you're putting them at risk, physically or emotionally, you're out. No arguments, no second chances. You disappear permanently. Understood. Third, we do this my way. I control how we tell them, when we tell them, what we tell them. They're 5 years old, Jiho. They don't understand gang politics or adult drama. They need age-appropriate truth delivered by someone they trust. Which is you. I get it. What else? Angela took a deep breath. I need financial security for them. Not because I'm trying to extort you, but because if your past catches up with you, if something happens to you, I need to know they're taken care of. College funds, insurance, trust funds, whatever it takes. I need to know that even if you're gone, they'll be okay. Done. My lawyer can set that up immediately. And finally, she looked down at her hands. I need you to be honest with me from now on. No more lies. No more secrets. If there's danger, I need to know. If there are threats, I need to know. I can't protect them if I don't have all the information. I promise. Complete honesty, starting now. They sat in silence for a moment. The weight of what they were agreeing to hung heavy between them. This wasn't a reunion or a romance restarting. This was a business arrangement built on necessity and the shared goal of keeping 3 children safe. I don't forgive you, Angela said quietly. What you did 5 years ago, how you left, the pain you caused. I don't forgive that, and I don't trust you. But I understand that right now, working together is better than the alternative. I'll earn your forgiveness, however long it takes. Don't make promises you can't keep. She pulled out a folder. Here's the information you'll need for your lawyer. My full legal name, the children's birth certificates, my contact information. Get the paternity test set up. The sooner we have legal documentation, the safer we all are. Jiho took the folder, handling it like the precious thing it was. Inside were copies of 3 birth certificates. Father, unknown. The words felt like a punch to the gut. Unknown. Because Angela had no way to contact him. No way to even try to tell him about the pregnancy. I should have stayed, he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. I should have fought to keep you safe instead of running away. I should have been there for their birth, for their first steps, for everything. I robbed us both of that. Yes, you did. Angela's voice was matter of fact, no sympathy in it. And you can't get that time back. None of us can. So the question is, what are you going to do with the time you have left? Be the father they deserve. Even if they hate me. Even if you hate me. I'm not walking away again. Good. Because I meant what I said before. If you bail on them, if you break their hearts the way you broke mine, I really will kill you. Slowly. Jiho believed her. And honestly, he'd deserve it. Over the next few days, things moved fast. The paternity test was arranged through attorney Choi, a simple cheek swab that took minutes, but felt monumental. Jiho watched as a technician swabbed his mouth, then did the same for all 3 children at Angela's apartment. Zuri kept asking questions about why they needed to do this. Amara looked worried. Kofi just went along with it quietly. It's just a test to help with some paperwork, Angela explained smoothly. Nothing to worry about. The results came back in 48 hours. 99.99% probability of paternity for all 3 children. Attorney Choi filed the necessary paperwork to legally recognize Jiho as their father. The wheels of bureaucracy started turning. Meanwhile, Jiho had to deal with the fallout from his broken engagement. Minesio's family was furious, threatening legal action over something, though their lawyer couldn't quite articulate what exactly had been violated. His own business partners were nervous about the negative publicity. And then there was his mother. She showed up at his penthouse unannounced one evening, letting herself in with the spare key he'd forgotten she had. Jiho looked up from his laptop to find her standing in his living room, arms crossed, expression severe. Yama, I didn't know you were coming. Because you've been avoiding my calls. Sit down. We need to talk. They sat on opposite ends of his expensive couch, the distance between them symbolic of the gulf that had always existed in their relationship. His mother had never been warm, had never been the type to give hugs or say, I love you. But she'd been there, in her own way. Stern but reliable. I want to meet them, she said without preamble. My grandchildren. When can I meet them? That's up to Angela, the children's mother. She controls access right now. Then set up a meeting. I want to see for myself what kind of woman managed to capture my son's heart so thoroughly that he threw away a perfectly good engagement. She didn't capture anything. I fell in love with her because she's brilliant and kind and strong. And I destroyed it because I was a coward. His mother studied him with sharp eyes. You really love her. This isn't just about the children. No, it's not just about the children. Does she love you back? She hates me, actually. With good reason. His mother sighed. You really did make a mess of this, didn't you? Spectacularly. They sat in silence for a moment. Then his mother said, Your father would be rolling in his grave right now. Mixed-race grandchildren from a foreign woman, his son going legitimate, all of it. He wanted you to be like him, hard and ruthless and Korean to the core. I know. Good thing he's dead then. She said it so matter-of-factly that Jiho almost laughed. I didn't like your father's world, Jiho. I stayed because I had no choice, because divorce was shameful and I had nowhere to go. But I never wanted that life for you. So if these children and this woman are your chance to build something different, something better, I support it. Really, don't sound so shocked. I'm not a complete monster. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. Set up a meeting. I want to meet my grandchildren. And this Angela woman. I need to see if she's worthy of you. Yama, I think it's more a question of whether I'm worthy of her. His mother paused at the door. Then prove that you are. Show her you're not the boy who ran away. Show her you're a man who stays. After she left, Jiho sat alone in his apartment, thinking about worthiness and redemption. Could a person really change? Could someone who'd spent years doing violence and living in shadows really become the kind of man who packed school lunches and attended parent-teacher conferences? He didn't know, but he was going to try. The next challenge came from an unexpected direction. Jiho was leaving his office building when a black sedan pulled up beside him. The window rolled down, revealing Park Dong-woo himself. The older man looked exactly as Jiho remembered. Cold eyes, expensive suit, the aura of someone who'd ordered deaths over dinner without losing his appetite. Get in, Jiho. We need to talk. Every instinct Jiho had screamed danger. But refusing would be worse, would show fear. So he got in the car, keeping his face neutral even as his heart raced. Park didn't speak until they were moving, the driver taking them through Seoul's evening traffic. You haven't been listening to my warnings. I've been listening. I'm just not complying. That's a problem. Only if you make it one. Park turned to look at him fully. You're different from 5 years ago. More confident. Less afraid. I'm not sure if that's growth or stupidity. Maybe both. Let me be very clear. The organization let you walk away because you were smart about it. You didn't take clients, didn't steal money, didn't threaten exposure. You just left quietly and built a legitimate life. We respected that. But now you're drawing attention to yourself, to us by extension. That woman, those children, they connect you to your past. And your past connects to us. They have nothing to do with the organization. Everything you touch has to do with the organization. That's how this works. Park leaned back, studying Jiho like a bug under glass. So here's your choice. Send the woman and children back to America. Cut all contact. Let this fade away. Or we handle it ourselves, and I promise you won't like our methods. Jiho felt ice in his veins, but he kept his voice steady. If you touch them, I'll burn your entire operation to the ground. I know where the bodies are buried, Park. Literally. I know which politicians you own, which businesses are fronts, which cops are on your payroll. You want to play this game? I'll expose everything. Park's eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. Try me. They stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Park laughed, a sound with no humor in it. You've got bigger balls than I gave you credit for. But balls don't stop bullets, Jiho. Think very carefully about whether this woman and these children are worth dying for. They are. Then you're a fool. Park knocked on the divider. The car pulled over. Get out. And consider this your last warning. Next time, we won't just talk. Jiho got out of the car and watched it drive away, his hands shaking. The threat was explicit now. Park wasn't going to let this go, which meant Jiho needed to move faster, needed to establish legal protections immediately, needed to make himself too expensive to kill. He pulled out his phone and called Attorney Choi. We need to accelerate everything. File all the documents, apply for protective orders, everything. We're out of time. What happened? Just do it. Please. That night, Jiho sat in his car outside Angela's apartment building, debating whether to tell her about his confrontation with Park. She'd demanded complete honesty, but would telling her about explicit death threats just terrify her? Or did she have a right to know how bad things were getting? Before he could decide, his phone rang. Angela. Something happened, she said without greeting. Someone followed me home from work. A black sedan. They didn't try to hide it. They wanted me to know they were there. Jiho's blood turned to ice. Are you and the kids okay? We're inside. Doors locked. But Jiho, I'm scared. I'm coming over. Right now. He made it to her apartment in record time, taking stairs 2 at a time. Angela opened the door before he could knock, her face pale. She pulled him inside and immediately locked the door behind him, engaging both the deadbolt and chain. The kids, he asked. Asleep. They didn't see anything. Thank God. She led him to the window, carefully pulled back the curtain. That car. It's been there for an hour. Jiho looked down to see a black sedan parked across the street, engine off. He couldn't see inside with the tinted windows, but he knew someone was in there. Watching. Waiting. Sending a message. Pack a bag, he said quietly. For you and the kids. Enough for a few days. What? What? Because you're not staying here tonight. It's not safe. You're coming with me. To where? My place. It's secure. Building has security guards, cameras, controlled access. They can't just walk into a Gangnam high-rise without being noticed. Angela's hands were shaking. This is really happening. They're really threatening my children. Our children. And yes, it's happening. Which is why we need to move. Now. Get them up. Tell them you're having a sleepover at a friend's place. Whatever story works. But we need to leave in the next 10 minutes. To her credit, Angela didn't argue further. She disappeared into the bedrooms, and Jiho heard her gentle voice waking the children. There were sleepy protests, questions, but she kept her voice calm and upbeat, turning fear into adventure. We're having a special sleepover. Won't that be fun? Grab your favorite toy. While she packed, Jiho called building security. This is Jiho Kong, penthouse unit. I'm bringing guests tonight. 3 children and their mother. No one else is authorized to come up. No one. I don't care what they say or who they claim to be. Understood, Mr. Kong. 20 minutes later, they were in Jiho's car, Angela in the passenger seat with an overnight bag, 3 confused children in the back seats. Zuri kept asking questions. Where are we going? Whose house? Why do we have to leave? Remember Mommy told you about surprises? This is a surprise adventure. Angela's voice was bright, fake cheerful in a way the kids probably sensed but didn't question. Jiho drove carefully, checking mirrors constantly for the black sedan. It followed them for the first few blocks, then peeled off, apparently satisfied with just intimidating them for now. Small mercy. His penthouse had never felt more cavernous than when 3 small children walked into it, their eyes wide as they took in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the expensive furniture, the sterile perfection of it all. It looked like a museum, not a home. Certainly not a place for kids. Whoa, Kofi breathed. This place is huge. Can we see the view? Amara was already running to the windows. Careful, Angela called out, then looked at Jiho helplessly. I'm sorry, they're not used to places with breakable things everywhere. It's fine. Let them explore. He crouched down to the children's level. I'm Jiho. This is my home, and you're welcome here. That hallway leads to guest rooms where you can sleep. There's 3 rooms, so you can each have your own if you want. Our own rooms. Zuri's eyes went wide. We always share. Can I really have my own? Absolutely. Angela was already corralling them toward the guest wing, getting them settled for the night. Jiho stood in his living room, listening to their voices echo through the space, and realized his sterile penthouse had more life in it right now than it had ever had before. After the kids were finally asleep, Angela emerged looking exhausted. She collapsed onto his couch, all the fake cheerfulness drained away. I'm terrified, she admitted quietly. I've never been this scared in my life. Not even when I was pregnant and alone and didn't know how I'd manage. At least then the danger was just poverty and stress. Now we're talking about actual criminals threatening my babies. Jiho sat down, but kept a respectful distance. I met with Park today, before the car showed up at your place. He made his position very clear. He wants you and the kids gone, back to America, out of my life. Then maybe we should go. Maybe that's the smart play. It won't work. These people have international reach. If they want to find you in America, they will. And without me nearby, without legal protections and visibility, you'd be even more vulnerable. So we're trapped. No matter what we do, they win. No, we go on offense. Jiho leaned forward, his voice intense. Tomorrow, we hold a press conference. We announce everything. My relationship with you, the children, my past with the organization, all of it. We drag this into the light and make it so public, so visible, that any move against you becomes a massive liability. Angela stared at him like he'd lost his mind. A press conference? Are you insane? That will destroy your reputation, your business, everything you've built. I don't care. You should care. What happens when you have no money, no power, no connections? How do you protect us then? Angela, none of that matters if you and the kids are dead. Don't you see? Reputation is a luxury. Right now, survival is the priority. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. I hate this. I hate that I brought them to Korea. I should have stayed in America. Should have kept them far away from you and your world. You couldn't have known. I should have. I knew you were hiding something 5 years ago. I felt it. The danger, the secrets. But I ignored my instincts because I was in love with you. And now my children are paying for my stupidity. This isn't your fault. It's mine. All of it. And I'm going to fix it. I swear. They sat in silence for a long time, both lost in their own fears. Finally, Angela spoke again. If we do this press conference, if we go public, there's no taking it back. The kids will know everything. They'll know you're their father. They'll know about your past. They'll see their faces all over the news. Are you ready for that? Are they ready for that? No one's ready for this. But it's the only move that keeps you alive. I need to think about it. This is too big a decision to make when I'm panicked and exhausted. Sleep on it. We're safe here tonight. Tomorrow, we make the call. He showed her to the master bedroom, insisting she take it while he'd sleep on the couch. She was too tired to argue. As she closed the door, she paused and looked back at him. Jiho, for what it's worth, I believe you're trying. I believe you care about them. I just wish that was enough. It will be. I'll make it enough. He spent the night on the couch, unable to sleep, listening to the sounds of his penthouse settling and the distant hum of Seoul's nighttime traffic. Somewhere in his guest rooms were 3 children who shared his DNA, who had his eyes and his stubborn chin and whole lifetimes ahead of them. Children who deserved safety and normalcy, and a father who wouldn't get them killed. Around 3 a.m., he heard a small sound. Padding footsteps. He sat up to find Kofi standing in the hallway, clutching a stuffed elephant. Hey, Jiho said softly. Can't sleep? The boy shook his head. The room is too big. And too quiet. I'm used to hearing my sister's breathing. Want to sit out here for a bit? Kofi nodded and climbed onto the couch beside Jiho, not quite touching but close. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before the boy spoke again. Are you mommy's boyfriend? The question caught Jiho off guard. No. We're old friends. Zuri says you look like us. Like me and Amara and her. She says maybe you're related to us. Jiho's heart clenched. Of course the kids would notice. They were smart. What do you think? I don't know. We don't have a daddy. Mommy says he had to go away a long time ago, before we were born. She says he would have stayed if he could. The lie Angela had told them, probably to protect them from feeling unwanted. It was generous, more generous than he deserved. Kofi, can I tell you something? Okay. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Big ones. And sometimes those mistakes hurt people we love. But the important thing is what we do after. Whether we try to make things right. Like saying sorry. Exactly like saying sorry. Except sometimes sorry isn't enough. Sometimes you have to prove you mean it. Kofi thought about this, his face serious. If someone hurt mommy, I'd be really mad at them. You should be. Your mommy deserves people who treat her right. Do you treat her right? The question was so direct, so honest, that Jiho felt it like a physical blow. I didn't. Not before. But I'm trying to now. Good. Because mommy cries sometimes. She thinks we don't notice, but we do. And I don't like when she's sad. I don't like it either. They sat together until Kofi's eyes started drooping. Jiho carefully carried the boy back to his room, tucking him in next to his sisters who'd apparently migrated to his room at some point. All 3 of them piled together like puppies, seeking comfort and closeness. His children. These 3 small humans were his children, and he'd die before he let anything happen to them. Stay with me through the end of this journey. And if this story speaks to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. The next morning, Angela emerged looking determined. She'd made her decision. We do the press conference. We go public. But we do it on my terms, with my narrative. I'm not letting you or anyone else tell our story wrong. Agreed. Whatever you need. I need you to be honest. Completely honest about everything. Your past, why you left, the threats we're facing. No sanitizing it. No making yourself look better. Just truth. I can do that. And I need you to let me speak. The world is going to judge me, a foreign woman with mixed children. I need to control that narrative, make it clear I'm not some gold digger or home wrecker. We need our lawyer present. And we need to file protective orders before we go public, so there's legal documentation supporting our claims. Attorney Choi can handle all of that. I'll call him now. By noon, they had a plan. The press conference would be tomorrow afternoon, giving them time to prepare statements and file the necessary legal documents. Jiho's PR team was already having heart attacks trying to manage the narrative, but he overruled them. This wasn't about spin. It was about truth and survival. The children spent the day in his penthouse, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing around them. They played with toys Jiho had ordered that morning, ate meals his housekeeper prepared, and slowly